And Ajahn, talking about characteristics, I wonder if you could say a few words about the characteristic of awareness. And I ask that in the context of the reminder that's often given that it's important to know the moments with awareness from the moments without awareness.
These are the teachings of the Buddha at all. No one knows what is there at moment of kusala. How many cetasikas are there? No way to understand it at all. Even what is kusala and what is akusala. But the Buddha realized the truth, enlightened the truth, all of the truth. So what the other cannot know, he knew. That's why he taught about what are there in one moment of kusala and akusala. For example, hiri, ottappa, sattha, see, and sati, and aloba, adosa, amoha are there, who knows? That's why we learn to understand different ones as it is. For example, hiri, we can understand that. And when we talk about sati, usually each moment is taken by lopa and ignorance all the time. But the understanding is different from ignorance. That's why what is there at moment of understanding and what is there at moment of ignorance, not just one reality, not just one cetasika or mental factor, there are many. That's why sati is wholesome cetasika, no matter it arises with kusala or vipaka or kriya, which is wholesome. That's why we learn to understand little by little about the different characteristics of each mental factor, cetasika. That's why we also drag away or taken away to such and such story and situation until there can be a moment of thinking which is different from that, like giving, for example. In a day, does everyone think about giving all the time? Or when situation is there, some will give and some will not give. See what conditions such different moment. And when it's wholesome, to see the benefit of helping the other, because what we give is so useful for that person. That's why at that moment, no I, but the accumulation of the wholesome realities are there, ready to arise. And sati is that which think about it, or just be aware. We use the word aware, but we cannot really understand the characteristic of the reality just by the word, but from considering the moment. But it is aware to give. See, different from moment when no thought about it at all. So at moment of wholesome thought, sati is there. Just not follow the ignorance and situation as usual with akusala. So it is the characteristic of sati. For example, it is sati to have Dhamma discussion, to understand what should be understood from different ones who attend the meeting. See, that is sati, to see the benefit of it there for the development of wholesomeness, no matter of what level or by what way or manners. That's why beginning to understand it, sati is that which aware of wholesome moment, forgiving, helping, and so on. Be kind, and what is there, which is different from moment, which is not those wholesome ways or manners. Can that be understood? Just that at any moment of wholesome is sati which arises and is aware of such manners of wholesomeness, like Dhamma discussion, reading Tipitaka, consider more careful and deeper, wiser, and so on, to just really understand the truth, not just the word. Because the words are so very close, like phassa. See, it's there. Not vitaka, not sati and so on. That's why any moment of even thinking in good way or wholesome moment, or the action of the body or the speech, it is sati which is aware of that wholesome reality, to do wholesome manners or good thing. Thinking about
Thanks, Ajahn. That's helpful, and I think what you're saying is that sati is also a common mental factor for all moments of kusala citta. Can its characteristic be known?
But it has to be started from the very beginning, the characteristic of sati in different manners in daily life before satipatthana, right?
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, the characteristic of satipatthana cannot be understood if we don't understand sati in daily life as it is that which is a way of wholesome realities to be done or to arise or to behave. This is sati in daily life without right understanding, right? But when there is some understanding at that moment, how come to understand without awareness of what is said about this and that, considered carefully? So sati is not panya, but it's there for panya to develop, to perform its function better and better when sati is there. But when there's no sati, how can panya be there? How can panya arise? And panya cannot arise without hearing the right words, the truth, the teaching of the Buddha. That's why it's different, sati with panya and sati without panya. See? And after panya, there can be sati at moment of understanding because it does not think about other things, but it is aware of the characteristic and the word, the meaning of it, and on, to be moment of understanding. What is that? Like nama, or citta, or cetasika. At moment of understanding, not just reciting, it's different. That's why beginning to understand the difference between all dhammas can lead to the understanding of that as not self, but it's the sati, because sati is that which is aware of wholesome reality, deeds, speech, and whatever is there. So at moment of listening, without sati, there cannot be any understanding at all. Just take the word and then forgot. Many people just study for many years, but no right attention or considering. There cannot be panya. Panya is conditioned too. That's why without sati, can panya arise? Or wholesome deeds, speech arise? That's why we learn the factor, the function of sati little by little, until when is strong enough, clear enough to be conditioned for understanding that which is hard right now, not just touch. Because when people touch and they know what is touch, a table or chair, bed or something, but at that moment, panya from understanding, the intellectual understanding, is there enough to understand what is there when sati is aware. So the characteristic of all realities can be known only when sati is there. Be aware of that characteristic. So now we are talking about sati, and there is sati at moment of understanding, but the characteristic of sati does not appear because it's not the samma sati with panya enough to understand what is there as anatta, no selection, no choice, no time to think about anything, because panya understands anatta. If anatta is not there to be known, how can panya understand it? But since all dhammas are anatta, but no panya to understand it, that's why from hearing and understanding better and better, it's the moment of beginning to understand that which is there, hardness. And I think that sometimes it depends on conditions, but when we take a bath, what we take for body and soap and see only hardness and softness, because it's the characteristic of coldness appear because the water is not hot. But when it's hot, heat appears. But at no less, no form, only that. That's why it begins to let go little by little, with the understanding from intellectual understanding enough. Otherwise, we take a bath without understanding what is there at all. It is still as soap and leg and so on. But the sati is there because panya is there enough to condition the direct awareness or sammasati. So at moment of beginning to, we can say aware of the reality, but it's different from other moments when there is touching, no awareness at all. Just continue on the story and thought about everything. But at that moment, it's the moment, very short attention or aware of that object. Without right understanding, how can that sati, which is aware of a reality, the nature, the characteristic of the object that is known. And panya is there too. That it's different from moment when we touch and no awareness at all. But that moment is touch and there is awareness of hardness. Even the panya is so weak, but it is the beginning to understand the characteristic of awareness, that it is different from hearing now and understanding, and there is awareness and other Cetasikas perform the function all the time. But it's the moment of beginning to be aware. We use the word aware to understand that as just hard, and understand better and better when there is more conditions to understand it, not just only hardness. And what is taken for self, our things so long, no matter through what doorways, but usually there is seeing almost in a day, all the time, when we wake up, not falling asleep, fast asleep yet. So in a day, no understanding of seeing, because seeing is all the time conditioned, while there are other moments of kusala and akusala and thinking and other doorway, but seeing is there all the time. So the clinging to seeing is so much that it hinders the truth of other moment as it is. But when there is sati, it's the moment of beginning to study that. See, that is the function of awareness, to be that. Very, very simple, ordinary, but it has to be with right understanding to understand. And right understanding is so very truthful, because how much understanding is the moment of awareness, which is aware of an object. See, no matter how much or how many moments develop little by little, what about that which is very deeply accumulated from life to life in years can be just beginning to show up, but not clear, not well, but just that as it is, that which is seen, not thinking about other things. That is the moment of being aware, not thinking about other things, only the characteristic which is there is aware, and begin to study Kijayana of that which appears little by little. So when sati arises, it's there, but it has to be only panya which understands it. Otherwise, it's ignorance as usual.
Thank you, Ajahn. As you said, it has to be panya that would understand and would know that panya, sati was there.
And when in the Pitaka it says too that the characteristic of panya can appear only with satipatthana. And everything, see, appear to satipatthana. Even panya appears at moment of satipatthana too. Now, panya does not appear. We understand what is meant by citta, cetasika, nama, rupa, But Panya, which understands, does not appear.
When it mentions in the Tipitaka that the characteristic is not floating away, not moving away, I think this is what you're mentioning about, like not thinking of other objects at that moment, or remembering what is wholesome when it arises.
Yes, that's why the meaning is very important, not just the word. We can use different simile and other things on the way of speech, but the characteristic is there to be considered. When there's more understanding, the words of the Buddha become true, not just by thinking, but by it there to be understood, little by little. For now, see, at moment of touching, it can be reminded as the object of understanding too. And what can be the moment to understand it? Sati, see, beginning to understand what's meant by sati. Even it does not show up when it's not the sammasati, direct awareness yet. But it develops from understanding little by little.
But can we say whenever sati arises, no matter it's with kusala citas or even with vipaka citas, it is guarding?
Guarded as the akusala dhammas cannot arise.
Like in one discussion, we were discussing about bhavanga citas. So even when there are kusala vipaka citas, such as bhavanga citas, the sati at that moment still has the function, or that it still manifests as guarding from akusala at that moment of vipaka, even though it's just a result.
One did that appear as object?
Of course not.
So that can the characteristic of sati appear when it's
no, not when it's vipaka, not when it's bhavanga citta, but it still has the same function and the same proximate condition and the same manifestation, even though it doesn't appear at all.
That's why we understand what's meant by javana, see? Not vipaka, which perform the function of bhavanga, and how many functions that vipaka can perform. By way of patisantichitta, bhavanga moment, juti, and seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, sampatichana, santirana, and pradhanapana. That's all. The function of vipaka. It's not like javana. It does not taste or experience the object.
Different function completely.
That's right, thinking about bhavanga, what bhavanga is now. It does not appear as object.